This is Abe Friedtanzer from Awards Buzz. Very excited to be speaking with Kris Bowers about The Wild Rhubarb. How are you, Kris?
Doing well, Abe. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I was looking back. I know we had spoken before with Ben Proudfoot about The Last Repair Shop, and I knew you were an Oscar nominee and a winner, but this is your first nomination for a score, which is interesting because that's your background is in music. But is it interesting that you had these other roles beforehand that got you to this point?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. Ben used to always say that he hopes to get me on that stage before I get there for score, and he was successful with that. So it's pretty fun. But yeah, this is a pretty meaningful moment for me. Just like you said, focusing on this area since I was a kid, and to be nominated by this branch and all of that just means so much to me.
I was also looking through your list of credits and I couldn't find much animation. Is this your first big animated score?
It is, yeah, which is also pretty fun.
Is there a specific challenge that comes with that, with working with something that's not live action?
Yeah, I mean, a few challenges. I think that the biggest challenge is that at the beginning you're working on the film with black and white pencil sketches, and so you know I didn't get to see the full beautiful like color version of this movie until the end of the process, and so much of the process with me writing was to the storyboard animatics and having concept art that looks like the final version, but it was mostly based on my conversations with Kris around the intent and emotion and perspectives of each moment, and then my own imagination. But I also think that another challenge that was really fun with this is that in this movie in particular, there isn't much dialogue. Like Kris always says, it's about 50% of the dialogue in your typical animated film. And because of that, and the fact that, animation is wall-to-wall music often, I think because the sonic world is being built from the ground up. So there isn't like, just interesting diegetic sound that already exists. The sound team is largely creating the sound world. And so music ends up taking a lot of that sonic space as well. And then without dialogue, music really needed to help move the story forward in a lot of moments and really help convey some of the unfolding of the emotional narrative. And that was something that was a fun challenge to have to write so much music that was so intricately woven to picture and the story, but then also have it be melodic and interesting enough orally that we want to follow the story, even though nobody's telling us what's happening. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. I also think that there's a lot of animated films I can think of and immediately go right to the music because there are just scenes where you said there's not necessarily that much dialogue. And especially with this one, I like the idea that there is so much interspecies conversation and all that is really sort of cool. What was your collaboration like with the sound team?
It was really intimate. I mean, I think that in the beginning, it was mostly us being aware of what each other was doing. Like I was on the project for almost 2 years, and they were on the project for I think even longer than that. And so by the time I was starting, even with those black and white storyboard images, the sound I was hearing was largely sound that they had already started experimenting with. And then vice versa, whenever I would finish a cue that Kris approved, we would send it to, the rest of the team so that the sound team had the latest version of that cue. And so what ended up happening is there were so many moments where I, for example, was experimenting with this unorthodox percussion that I thought would be a fun way to extend the diegetic sound of these animals skittering through the forest in a percussion ensemble and mix them differently so that this percussion ensemble, sandbox percussion, was like almost this ASMR layer on top of the orchestra. And that is something that could definitely, if it wasn't treated collaboratively from the beginning, could have been kind of an issue for the sound team. But because they had that so early on, they were able to look at things like in moments where that percussion is very active to strip away some of the sound, or there are moments where that percussion is intentionally hitting certain things. Like when Roz is sliding down a hill and her head gets hit by branches, the piece that I've written hits each of those moments. And so they would do things like put the sound effect of her head hitting that branch just slightly a frame or two off so that you could orally hear both items striking clearly, but at the same time, it's like almost this optical illusion where we're not really seeing that it's not hitting exactly with the frame of when it hits the branch. They also would do things like on the bedtime sequence, for example, I wrote this arpeggiated cue that hits each of these stars when the stars illuminate, and they added sounds when those stars illuminate that are the same pitch as the notes that were hit in the score, but they're slightly detuned so that there's clarity in what's a sound effect and what's music. And so, because we had so much time and there was so much awareness of what each other was doing, we were both able to get very in intricate details like that. And then in the end, what was fascinating is that I was on the dub stage way more than I've ever been in the past. And I think more often than a lot of composers are because we were very collaborative in deciding how to mix the score and the sound and deciding moments where we would even take score completely out, moments where score needs to be big and sound needs to come almost all the way out and then really being mindful of moments where certain aspects of the score should come up, but certain aspects should come down. So a string ostinato might be turned up so we get that driving energy, but the percussion's turned down so that it doesn't cover up the efforts from the animals and things like that. So it was a really collaborative process and a lot of fun.
Prior to the soundstage part, is that common to have such, back and forth early on with this kind of stuff, or not really?
No, I really wish it were more often. I think that speaks so much to Kris Sanders as a director that he had the foresight to understand that that was going to be an important relationship. And so definitely not common and something that I think Chris and Jeff Herman were really mindful of from the beginning.
I just spoke with Chris a little bit ago, and I was just struck by his passion for every little piece of just the whole animated approach. And so it's clear that that's something that's unusual in a great way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I also had the chance to attend an event a couple months ago in person where you performed and Maren Morris performed "Kiss the Sky," and that was really cool. And I'm curious about your collaboration with Maren on just the score and song that way.
Yeah, and that's another moment that was very unique where, basically um Mary Blee, the picture editor, she was working on this sequence for the flight training montage where she wanted it to feel like one complete sequence, one complete idea, and the song that Marin and the songwriters had provided was incredible and working really well, but it was, half as long as Mary wanted the scene to be. And so watching the scene and seeing how clear Mary had cut the arc of it, I asked if I could have the stems for that song, which is also very unusual. I feel like I've asked for stems before, and most songwriters don't want to give stems to a composer, essentially. And they were very forthcoming, Mary and the songwriters, and they gave me all the stems, which are like the individual tracks, like drums, guitar, vocals, background vocals. And so then I was able to work with my music editor Devon Watts to cut together the shape of this sequence in a way that I thought worked well and still delivered the song, but matched what Mary had cut. And then I orchestrated around it so that it not only felt like it had the ups and downs of the sequence in even a bigger way to make more of a dynamic shape with the orchestra, but also allowed me to create like a little interstitial section and like a key change, and then a reharmonization at the very end so that it kind of had this like one last moment of newness as Bright Bill finally succeeds and is kind of coming down for his landing. And so really it was just following this clear emotional trajectory that Mary had laid out in the edit, and then sent that to or played it for Mary and Chris, and they were excited by it. So then we sent that to Marin and the songwriters, and they were into it. And then Marin and the songwriters re-recorded their parts, then sent those stems back, and then we remade the piece again. And then in the final recording session at Air Studios, Marin and the songwriters were even present virtually to listen in to see if they had any other thoughts on how to add to it. And we added some choir unexpectedly and things like that. So it really was this collaborative effort to shape that whole sequence, which I think is a large part of the reason why it feels so well matched and married to the film.
What was your first opportunity to see the film, in a theater with an audience?
With an audience, it was at TIFF at the premiere. Yeah, and that was really special. And just seeing this movie with people, like getting all the feelings that you get from this movie and really seeing that those things were landing was really special.
Does this make you want to do more animation?
Oh yeah, I mean animation is like has such a special place in my heart. When I was a kid, I watched cartoons all the time, and I actually wanted to be an animator just as much, if not slightly more, than being a composer and a musician for a while. Um, I went to like cartooning school, and I remember seeing Toy Story and being blown away by computer animation and deciding like that's what I wanted to get into. And so to be a part of this movie means so much. And then also just the responsibility that music has in animation historically to help tell the story, and how many moments, you watch early Disney cartoons or Tom and Jerry or those types of cartoons where there's no dialogue at all. And I watched those so much when I was a kid, and that's the first exposure I had to music really largely helping tell the story along with the action, to tell us how we're supposed to feel. And so to be a part of animation is huge, but also to be a part of a movie like this where Kris really wanted to honor and modernize that tradition, I think was really exciting.
I can tell you have an appreciation for good music, and I'm curious what some other soundtracks this year from films that you've really appreciated are.
Oh man, this year. I'm trying to think of. I thought the score for The Brutalist was really unique and really interesting. And Daniel's such a great guy, and I really appreciated how much he collaborated with specific players and like really embraced the way that they play their instrument to create that score. Um, I'm trying to think of other ones that like it's not a score that was written, but the music um supervision, I guess, for Maria was also like really incredible. The way they use all of her music throughout the film to score the film, I think was very, very impactful. Um and uh and the Challenger score was a lot of fun. I thought that like, it just made tennis feel like something we've never seen before. And I also think, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Trent Atticus, but I also think that that it's one of those instances where that movie wouldn't have been the same without that score. With a different score, it would have been a completely different movie. And so, I think what they did with that score was pretty incredible. And actually, one other movie that's like a dark horse that I feel like should have gotten more recognition is Hilder's score for Joker 2. Like I remember watching that movie expecting to watch it from the place that everybody was talking about, how like, everybody was panning it. And I actually thought it was not only a good movie, but I also thought her score was so incredible. And the way she like rearranged some of those songs and like sounded so much like her, to me was like really, really masterful. I remember watching that and feeling like very almost upset that movie, and especially that score, wasn't championed more, because I feel like what Hilder did was amazing.
What do you have coming up score wise?
You know, next year I'm working on another animated film, actually, a Sony animated film, and then there's Bridgerton season 4, and then I'm working on a samurai movie with Blitz Bazawule, who did The Color Purple. But it's another movie that's probably, a year or two away. So it's right now it's just kind of focusing on this and working on some other projects. Like I'm writing a piano concerto for myself with the National Symphony Orchestra. It's going to be premiered in June, and then also Ben Proudfoot and we are really in the middle of this $15 million capital campaign we're doing for the repair shop itself, where that shop is not supported by the tax dollars that go to music education in the same way that music classes and music instruments are. And so we are working with the LUSD Education Foundation and with the shop to raise this 15 million. And at this point, I think we're about 10% of the way there, with, a little over $1 million pledged. And so it feels really exciting to be putting a lot of energy into making sure that this fixture in LA that ensures that these students in public schools, 82% are below the poverty line, that those kids are still able to have access to instruments for free, and have access to working instruments.
Okay, great. Do you have plans to make another short with Ben at some point?
Yeah, we're always talking about stuff. Like we're working on a couple other things. Like we're working on a a doc together that I'm scoring, and then we're working on maybe writing something together, like a feature. And so, yeah, we're definitely going to be making a lot more together. I'm excited for that.
Amazing. Well, I'll keep an ear and an eye out for all those projects. Thank you so much, Kris. It was great to see you again.
Yeah, same here, Abe. Thanks so much.